This video is for you if you're just getting to grips with resistance training, either as a level 2 fitness instructor or as a level 3 PT. Doesn't really matter where you are on the scale. You might already be a PT and just looking for a little bit of freshen up for your programs, but also continuously learning, which obviously is the name of the game. We want you to continuously learn. So I wanted to go over the resistance training variables. So often when people are looking to progress in their exercise, they end up just relying on resistance, and really there are so many more variables. So I want to go over those just so you've got a pinpoint that you can always come back to, and to make sure that you're using all the variables you can for yourself and for your clients as well. So you have all heard of the FIT principle. If you haven't by now, then where have you been? So the first one is frequency. This is a really easy part to get your head around. This is the number of times that your client or you are going to the gym every single week. And obviously the more they do, the harder it would be. So let's have over here harder and easier. So if you wanted to make it harder, you could technically increase frequency over time. If you want to make it easier, you could reduce frequency. So that's a typically very easy one to get your head around, but basically a nice way of looking at that is on a rest week, you could literally just cut your client's number of sessions that they're doing and take it down to 2 sessions per week rather than 3. Now you might say, oh God, that leaves me without my 3rd session of income from that client for that week. But you've got so many other ways that you could add value by doing that, and that could be a nutrition session, could be a client lifestyle testing session. So you could go back through your measurements that you took in the first week, every 4th week, so that you're able to cut the frequency but actually give them more value. So frequency is still really important, and a lot of people forget it because they get so caught up in the business side of it. I'm going to leave intensity for a second, and that's because it's a biggie. I'll cover these 2 and then I'll pop back up. So the first one on here, we've got time. Obviously, if your client is going for a longer period of time, it's going to be slightly harder than if they're going for a smaller volume of time, and that's in terms of the length of their sessions, so the overall length of session. The final T down here is type. So the type is going to really rely on the complexity of the movement. So let's have a look at complexity. You could have complex over here, would make it really tough compared to simple, and by that I mean you potentially could have some more coordination or some more agility exercises, which are going to make it more hard over time compared to simple exercises. Or you might have things like free weights on this side compared to resistance machines to make it slightly easier for your client. You could also have balance and stability. So obviously a very stable environment is going to be much other way around. A very stable environment is going to be much easier for them to do than unstable. So you could take this in terms of running. Someone running on a treadmill has got a very stable level to work on. What compared to unstable would be running outside on the grass or in the mud. You can take that into the gym and into resistance training by actually looking at things like a BOSU stability ball kind of angle on things to make it unstable, or just even simply taking the exercise to one leg. Remember, this though generally doesn't make it harder on the target muscle. So say I'm doing a bench press and then I go and lay on a stability ball to do a bench press. I am making it unstable, but really that instability works the core. It doesn't actually work that muscle any harder. So the chest muscle in the example. So bear that in mind when you're looking at adding instability. And also for this one, I would definitely advise your clients who are a little bit more advanced, because you want to make sure that no injuries are going to happen as well. So let's, the other part on type, is going to be the training approach used. Now, some of you have heard of supersets, you've heard of trisets, giant sets, pyramids, drop sets, forced reps. What else have we got? Negatives, all the ones that you've been encouraged to do through your level 3 PT. But also, alongside those ones you might have just done in the gym before yourself, so things like wave training, ton-ups, numerous amounts of them. So as you're going through and having a look at all the different training approaches you can do, it's really important when you structure those over time, you don't regress your client if you're aiming to progress them. Keep it really clear as to what one is favoured for an easier option and what one is favoured for a more difficult option, because that will really help you. So line up the training approaches you imagine using for those 8 weeks, and then you can start ordering them as appropriate and as logical for progression for your client. But really, these training approaches are just a grouping of these intensity variables that I'm going to go through now. They've basically just been pre-manufactured so that it's easy and you have rules to follow when you're doing a training approach. So you can just say, I'm going to do a superset, rather than saying, I'm going to limit rest in between 2 exercises of the same muscle group. So that's kind of the theory behind training approaches as well. So let's look at intensity. I'll start off by explaining to you the R's. The R's are a really good way of remembering all of the different variables that help us vary intensity in our resistance training. So I wouldn't want to be unfair. Let's start with resistance. Clearly, if you take the resistance up, it is harder. So take the resistance up, take the resistance down to make it easier. Pretty simple. Okay, then we've got repetitions. So technically, if I didn't change my resistance, so I'm still on 20 kilos for that bicep curl, and as I do that 20 kilos, I haven't changed the resistance, I change the reps. I say, right, instead of 10 this week, I want you to do 12. I've technically made it harder by increasing the number of repetitions. Now, I know that that is opposing to your strength endurance continuum, which is basically the pyramid, which says endurance should be 12 to 15 reps, hypertrophy should be 8 to 12, and then strength should be below 8 reps. As you're looking at that, technically then it's harder when you get to less reps. So please don't confuse the two. The difference on that is on the strength continuum, it factors in resistance because you're working at repetition max. But technically, if we're squeezing out the last couple of reps on the same resistance, it's harder because we're doing more work. Our muscle fibres have to contract more often. So, repetitions is one. Another one is range of movement. So, range of motion. Obviously, the greater you increase your range of movement, the harder it would be compared to a smaller range of movement. So for instance, in this case, let's think of a squat. You get a beginner to do a squat and maybe their range of movement is really, really small. In which case, over time, you want to progress that, which will gradually make it harder. They recruit more of each muscle fibre that's being used, and they actually use their body functionally how it's supposed to be. So range of movement is a really big variable to work at, and a lot of people don't do that. So they don't play around with that. Another one that I wanted to do is rate. So this is the time spent in the exercise. You've probably heard of eccentric training, whereby you'd go really slowly down on the eccentric phase of the movement and then normal pace up. So it might be like 8 down, 2 up. But either way, rate encourages time under tension, which means that those actin and myosins have to really, really work hard at holding your and controlling that muscle contraction, either in concentric or eccentric phase. So the rate, if you take it for a longer repetition, or that's going to be much harder than if you do a shorter or faster. repetition. So longer or slower. So a slower repetition that takes longer to do is harder than a shorter repetition that is faster to do. So those that think they're doing really well by doing a really fast, high momentum exercise actually have made it easier on themselves because the actin and myosin have less time under tension, and also they could well be using momentum to help them in that as well. So rate was the other one. So we've got resistance, repetitions, range of movement, rate, and then the next one is recovery. So this is the recovery period that you may use. The recovery period will vary depending obviously on the sets and the goals that your client's on, but generically the longer that they have in between each set, the easier that would make it. And the shorter that they have in between each set would make it harder. So on the strength continuum there are recommended number of seconds per repetition range. So for instance you do 10 reps, ideally you should have 90 seconds rest before you go back in. That is still flexible, so they're the recommendations, but that is still flexible if you're looking to then challenge your client over the time. So the next week you might turn around and say, I want to recover for longer. The next week you would recover for a shorter period. I'll wake up in a second. Recover over a shorter period as a progression for that client. Or maybe they're injured and you need to regress it and you'll increase the recovery rate. It's also a nice way of balancing for beginners, giving them longer than the recommended so that you can gradually work your way up to a shorter rest that suits them. So these are our 5 R's and a really easy way of remembering all of your variables. But there are a few more because why not? Volume. So volume, obviously the more rests that your client does, the more sets, that your client does, the harder technically that's going to be. There's going to be more demand on those muscle fibres compared to less of volume. Say 1 set compared to 10 sets German volume training. There's a big difference between the two on the demand for the body. So we've got the 5 R's, we've got volume. What else are we missing? So we've got frequency, intensity, time and type. These are our main ones. So we're going to stick with these for now, the 5 R's and a V. These cover most things. So when you're looking at your intensity levels, really consider these with your clients. So let's take week 1 for a client, absolute beginner client. I'm going to have a low frequency, so I might say, it's only week 1, let's just go 1 time a week. You're just getting used to it, I want to see how this works. I'm going to have a light resistance on lesser reps, a light resistance, ignore the lesser reps. And then I'm going to do range of movement, could be small, but we still recommend a good range of movement for everything. And then I could be slightly faster, but we do recommend that average level so that you're actually getting benefits from it. And then longer recovery periods and less sets. So overall I'm saying less frequency, lesser resistance, a long recovery and less sets overall. Then I could choose a simple training approach, something like a resistance machine that's very stable, that's going to mean they don't have to engage all of these stabilising muscles as well. And I could make the session fairly short in total. So as the weeks progress, and I'm heading towards their 12-week goal, I could be just tweaking one of these a little bit more. So I'd just turn one of them round. So for instance, I might say, okay, let's just take the volume up 1. We're going to just take it up to 2 sets next week. Then I go to week 3 and I might go, right, let's just take that range of movement a little bit deeper again. Okay, week 4, now let's take the frequency up. Let's make it that little bit more coming to the gym, even though I might now take the resistance down a little bit just so that she's getting used to it in between. Then week 5, I could take the resistance up again. I could increase the number of repetitions at the same resistance. So you see where I'm going with it? You literally just tweak something every single week and then you're guaranteed progression. Now, most of you, if you're doing level 3, would have had an introduction to periodization training, whereby we advocate a GAS principle approach, whereby week 1 is sort of not too hard for your client. It's a progression from where they were at week 0. So it's still a progression in that they're now doing something, there is action. Week 2 is a slight progression on week 1, and by that I mean something has changed to make it harder. So you've changed one of these over. Week 3 again is a progression. At least one thing has changed to make it harder from where they were. Now week 4 we really advocate that you taper it down for week 4. Now that could be as simple as just cutting the frequency. So you could just say, still going to keep our intensity just as high, but this second session we're going to not have, and instead we're going to do nutrition day that week. So you're able to sort of structure in other aspects which make it less demanding on the body. But the real reason why we do this is we're forcing a plateau which allows this general adaptation to happen in the body. If we overload, we never get any point whereby our body can plateau and really adapt, which means that in doing this, our body will force us into that, which is usually the shape of injury or illness or excuses. Okay? So what we want to do with our clients is force that plateau for week 4, which makes it slightly easier, allows adaptation so that they can regain back in at week 5, they can regain back to where they were level with week 3, and then they can start stepping up again, and then before they dip back down. So overall it still progresses. That's the main thing. Overall it will still progress, but you're looking at general adaptation syndrome whereby it goes up, 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 a little rest. And the beauty of that is your client's potentially not going to get as injured, they get variety, and also it allows you to set a really good realistic plan for your clients, allowing for that plateauing effect as well. So I hope this helped you when you're looking at variables and how to change them for your resistance training for your clients. I know my guys that are training towards level 3 PT at the moment have definitely gone through this, so it'll be good to see you having completed that in your plans when you hand them in. Those of you that are not training with us, I hope this has benefited you in your own training, or if you're already a PT, that it benefits you when you're thinking about training with your clients. It's easy to get caught back into that resistance trap where all you change is the resistance because you're worried your client can't give you any more frequency or time. So play with some of these other ones and it will really shake some things up and hopefully get your clients some amazing results as well, allowing you to recruit different motor units as you go through and for your body to understand its training in a different way. Variety is key. So I hope this has helped. If it has, please click the like button below, and also leave a little comment so that we know what's been beneficial and any questions you've got so that we can create another one which will help you in your revision as well. So have a fantastic day and get training.